Panelists, Dr. Dendera, thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Karen Bass, for the invitation to testify today. The United States and Zimbabwe have had a long and supportive relationship. The United States remains Zimbabwe's biggest donor and has already given $1 billion in aid since 2001. The out of Mr. Mugabe in November 27, after a military-led Guardian coup that ended in his resignation, is an outcome that many of us would not have predicted. I believe I also speak for my generation, those of us born after independence, when I say the idea of a post-Mugabe Zimbabwe is quite surreal. Mr. Mugabe's 37-year tenure was complex. While he made significant improvements in welfare provision, his authoritarian rule resulted in much suffering, notably the 1983 Matabeleland genocide and violence against political opponents. In response to the declining economy, at least 2 million Zimbabweans emigrated. At least 80,000 of those found refuge in the United States. Zimbabweans in the United States are highly skilled, and many of them have been educated at top universities, including MIT, Harvard, and Yale. Zimbabwean Americans have also made significant contributions in the arts, for example, the brilliant Black Panther actress Danai Gurira. While Zimbabweans celebrated the change in the government, this quickly turned into alarm when the continued involvement of the military in otherwise civilian affairs. When I flew into the Harare International Airport in early December, soldiers required everyone arriving to show our IDs. This was new for Zimbabwe. It is unlikely that an unreformed ZANU-PF government will usher in a democratic system. It is also unlikely, following the death of Morgan Tsvangirai, that a divided opposition climate will spur democratic growth. It is my expert opinion that additional government-to-government aid and investment will not solve Zimbabwe's problems in the absence of significant reforms that address elections, corruption, and economic development. While President Mnangagwa has stated his commitment to free and fair elections, state media is heavily controlled by the ruling party. Democracy cannot thrive when the media is stifled. State institutions such as the police and the military remain partisan. The peacefulness of the 2018 election is that at risk. Zimbabwe's high youth unemployment has also created a readily available marketplace of youth who can be paid to harm others. Inter-party violence is also a growing concern. However, despite these restricted access to state media, initiatives such as the Open Pali platform and Bus Stop TV, a political satire group, have effectively utilized social media and have a combined reach of over 500,000 citizens. Voice of America remains an important media platform, reaching nearly 700,000 citizens weekly. I recommend that the United States continue providing funding for VOA and independent media. Zimbabwe loses between $1 to $2 billion from corruption each year. President Mnangagwa has promised zero tolerance on corruption. However, to date, corruption investigations have targeted only those affiliated with the losing pro-Mugabe faction of ZANU-PF. At least 5 members of President Mnangagwa's cabinet have been implicated in corruption worth billions of dollars. Although President Mnangagwa recently announced that some officials have heeded his call to return stolen funds and to declare assets, no specifics have been shared about those returns. Corruption is an epidemic. For this reason, it is important for the United States to engage the new government very strongly and firmly on corruption. ZANU-PF often blamed Zimbabwe's stunted economic growth on economic sanctions, in particular, United States Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act, ZIDERA. Lack of clarity on both the Zimbabwe and US investor side on the requirements of ZIDERA have had some negative implications on investment. For example, Zimbabwean businesses have been denied credit by American banks who are not clear on the policy requirements under ZIDERA. Clarity on the types of business-to-business engagements acceptable within the confines of ZIDERA is required. I also recommend that the United States reconsider sanctions on state-owned businesses. Justifiably, the United States has long been concerned with the link between ZANU-PF and state enterprises. Indeed, much of the corruption has occurred in the state-owned businesses. However, it is my expert opinion that in the post-Mugabe era, legislative independence has been bolstered and the parliament is now equipped to hold government officials to account. Regarding individual sanctions, the onus is on those listed to prove their commitment to democracy. Many on the list have allegedly committed horrible crimes against humanity. It would be a greater injustice to lift these sanctions before a thorough investigation has been conducted. Zimbabwe cannot have economic growth that is divorced from addressing human rights abuses. Robert Mugabe's exit from politics is not enough to absolve individual crimes. President Mnangagwa's motto is that Zimbabwe is open for business. Zimbabwe has long been open for business, but poor governance bottlenecked efforts by local and foreign investors. President Mnangagwa has said all the right things necessary for conducive business environment in Zimbabwe. The real test will be whether he follows through on his promises. His government has thus far made adjustments to unpopular policies, including the Indigenization Empowerment Act, which should help increase investor confidence. While the United States faces tough competition from China and Russia in sourcing Zimbabwe's natural resources, Zimbabweans that I've spoken to have indicated a preference for American business. A democratic Zimbabwe and strengthened U.S.-Zimbabwe economic partnership remains mutually beneficial for the two countries. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I thought you might have one final statement to make. I appreciate it. Let me begin the questioning first. Maybe Ambassador Ray, if I